ask him to stay long enough for the clouds to fly me away.
I was invited by my friend Hal Wilner, who's a producer, to do a tribute to Tim Buckley. Hal had done many of these multi-artist tributes, specifically at St. Anne's Church in Brooklyn. He rang me up in the spring of '91 and suggested I be a performer at this event. So I was very happy about that. And I said, I love Tim Buckley. I had bought Tim Buckley's albums in college and in high school and was a fan. So then he said, well, listen, his son Jeff has contacted us. And I was surprised to hear about Jeff. I said, I didn't know Tim had a son. He said, yeah, well, neither do we, but he's come forward. He wants to be part of this. And I think that you would be a good person to collaborate with. So I said, sure, I'm happy to meet him. You know, I had an open mind about it. So I went down to this rehearsal for the event, which was, I believe, in May '91. And I had a singer I was working with, and we did a couple of Tim's songs, and they went well in the run-through. And then I was packing up to leave, and this young man approached me. Right away, I said, this must be Jeff Buckley, because he looked pretty much as a young, identical version of Tim with long hair at that point, and he was electric. He was vibing me and rolling and popping his eyes, and he just looked on fire and jumping out of his skin. So he came up to me. I said, you're Jeff Buckley. And he said, yeah, you're Gary Lucas. I love your guitar playing, man. I read about you in Guitar Player magazine. I loved you with Captain Beefheart, and I really just thought what you did was incredible in the rehearsal. I said, oh, you were there? And he said, yeah, I was sitting in the back. I saw it. So I was happy to get this enthusiastic response, and I suggested that he come round the next day to my flat in the West Village to work up one of his father's songs. And Hal had suggested we do The King's Chain, which was a Tim Buckley song from his Sophronia album. So I prepared for Jeff to come over and created an arrangement, and he came round and we got right down to it after a little talk. I had set up a loop on one of my electronic 16-second delays of a guitar figure. It sounded like a raga, and I was playing it over it and started to play the chords, handed Jeff the mic, and suddenly I heard the most magnificent voice issue forth, and I was just impressed and astounded at his beautiful tone and the power of his voice, and I knew right away he's an incredible vocalist. So we finished the number, and then Jeff said, what did you think? And I said, you were awesome, man. You're a fucking star. And he was like very shy about this. He said, really? I am? I said, yeah. So I said, well, let's go and have lunch now, okay? Because I wanted to talk to him about this. We were sitting outside, I'll never forget, on a beautiful spring afternoon, and right away we started talking about who's your favorite artist, what groups do you like. That's what musicians do when they get together. So he was, very, sure of this, his likes, and it turned out that we, both of us, loved the Doors, the Smiths, and Led Zeppelin. I think their names came up right away. And if you notice, all of them had shamanistic lead singers and guitar god, figure in the front line. Then we went back and we jammed another song right then and there. This beautiful song called Bluebird Blues just emerged. I had some music, and Jeff just grabbed the mic and he started improvising. So I'm like, whoa, this guy is a pleasure to work with. He's so creative. He's just, bursting at the seams with ideas and music, and I think he'd be a good foil. That's how I met Jeff, and that was like in the first 2 days of meeting him. The story of Grace is an extension of this first meeting with Jeff. But then he went back to LA. I went off on a tour of Europe, and my first solo album had just come out. It's getting amazing reviews while I'm in Europe. 4 or 5-star reviews. Q magazine in the UK, 5 stars. And they're all saying this, incredible guitar god is here, and, with a great album. And so I'm riding high on this. I came back to New York in late June and rang up to CBS Records, Columbia Records A&R, to discuss the status of the recording deal. I'd been under a contract for a couple of years. Now, the head of A&R refused to take the call, and they put the junior A&R guy on. And this guy hadn't even come to the show with Jeff. He hadn't even bothered to show up. So I said, look, I just came back from Europe. My first album is rocking, I just wanted to tell you that. And he said, well, I guess you probably heard, Gary, but we've decided to drop your whole project. And I'm like, you can't, how can you do that? We have a written contract. And he comes back with this line, it's a classic, and that is, you can't afford to sue us. And I'm like, yeah, hard times in the music biz. And then he said, maybe we can have lunch, And that was it, so I hung up. My wife is standing by me, and she says, what, what, you lost this deal? And I'm like, yeah. I had this great album, it didn't seem to matter, nobody cared there. So even with 5 stars in Q and whatnot. But then I said, listen, Jeff, I have Jeff who's in LA. Jeff said he would be in this project. So I rang him up, and he right away said, I'll be your singer. So I went to bed not so freaked out, we'll keep going with Gods and Monsters. We'll rise from the ashes of this setback. Don't let the bastards wear you down. So the next thing was, well, I got to come up now. We have one song we wrote that day, the first day I met him, but now we need some new songs, for this new project. So I had my guitar out right away on the next morning. And the way I like to write is I just pass my fingers unconsciously over the strings and try and disengage my conscious mind. Gradually, I built up instrumentals. It's like chiseling a block of marble for a sculptor, You just chisel away, you push all this material around and massage it a bit. And when I feel I have a finished instrumental, I'll play it through and make a recording of that. And then if I can sleep on it and then the next day remember that instrumental, I think I have a good keeper. That's my criterion. It's never failed me yet. So anyway, I had these 2 instrumentals and I gave them titles just to compile them under a title, right? And one I titled Rise Up to Be, and the other I titled And You Will. And these titles were kind of Zen messages to encourage Jeff to come to New York and join this band. So I sent him a cassette of me playing these 2 songs. And he called me up a few days after receiving them and said, they're beautiful. All right, I'm gonna work on them. And next thing I knew is he came to New York. I think we're out now in August '91, and he pulled in on a bus playing bass in a party band doing promotional party appearances for the film The Commitments. He brought a notebook with him. He carried around an artist's notebook that didn't have lined paper. It was all sketch paper. And on this, he had little sketches and also lyric ideas and poems and ideas for these songs. So I have a tape of us sitting together on a couch like this. And I got my guitar, and he goes, okay, start. And I start playing Grace, which was then Rise Up to Be, and he goes, there's a moon asking to stay. And that's how it got done. I mean, the lyrics were different. There were some that were retained, but some were discarded. But the whole thing is there, essentially, on this little duo tape on the couch. The only modification Jeff made was he had me repeat one of the patterns. He doubled the length because he said, I have some more words here. I hear a verse here, okay. That was it. And in this way, I tell you, he was the best collaborator I ever had, because I could hand him finished instrumentals and he could come back with the most perfect lyrics and melodies to fit them like a glove. He never changed anything. You know, really, this is just a wonderful partner to have that way. And he loved the instrumentals, and they inspired him to come up with his parts. So I think certainly the total sum of the two people coming together achieved a greater, I think, you know, thing than had I tried to work up my own lyrics or melodies on this music, which I did. You know, before I met Jeff, I had a fragment, I think, of Grace, half of it done, and I had some ideas for it, but, you know, what we had there was perfect. So I got excited, and I said, well, we need to demo these up properly now. Let's put get my band together, and we'll go in and cut this in a demo studio, you know. We had a rehearsal, and I brought in these two guys, Jared Nickerson and Tony Lewis, who were both excellent players. And the whole time, Jeff had his back to us, and he was just sort of mumbling into the mic. So I didn't really pay attention to what he was doing. I just trusted he knew what he was doing, and I took the leap of faith. Like, that kid knows what he's doing. I prefer this than to be a dictator whenever I work with people, because sometimes you have to be to get your way and make it like you want to hear it. But seeing as this was a new collaboration, I just thought, I'm going to leave it alone. So I was just concerned of playing the guitar accurately and making sure the ensemble sounded right. I don't even remember what he, you know, sang. It just was, I'm sure it's going to work kind of a feeling. And then we went into a studio called Krypton Studios in New York, and they had done some good albums there. So early August '91, I went in there about noon with the guys. Jeff was not there. And we worked out these two songs. We had a few false takes, and a string or two broke, but we got two reasonable tracks together of guitar, bass, drums, a few overdubs of guitar. And then Jeff came around, and the other guys left. So it was me, Jeff, and the engineer. And it's about 5 p.m. now. And Jeff went out into the dark studio to do his vocals. I just sat in the booth. Suddenly I heard him sing on the tracks, and I'm like, oh my God, listen to this. It's like, you know, stunning to be sitting there. And then he overdubbed some little vocal parts and a harmonica on Grace. And the whole thing came together real quick. And it's now about 6. And when he walked in, it was just like, you know, the first time I'd jam with him. So he's like, it was any good? And I go, are you kidding? It was fucking awesome, man. It's like incredible. So the next session was starting at 6 with a jazz drummer. And we didn't even have time to do proper mixes. They just dumped monitor mixes onto a DAT. That's all I left there with. But when I left there, I was like, I have the atomic bomb in my pocket on this DAT. This is going to shake the world, this music. It's really going to, you know, I knew it. You know, like it sounded really eerie to hear, wait in the fire. These little elfin voices Jeff put on at the end on the demo, this whispered, like, wait in the fire. If you listen to the demo, which is on an album that came out called Songs to No One, Jeff Buckley and Gary Lucas. Listen to the original demo, and then listen to Jeff's Grace from the Grace album 2 years later. I mean, he didn't do those voices at the end, so they're a little treat buried in the track, but you'll hear them. You know, the whole thing had a haunted feel, and that's what I've always gone for with a lot of my music. I'm trying to push the envelope and go beyond the normal realm into spirituality and the other side of the veil. I'm very proud of the work we did. And yeah, you know, again, I think it was just the right moment at the right time and all the energy coming together. And we were sort of on the same page at that point, which was, we're gonna take this Led Zeppelin, Doors, Smiths thing and kick it in the ass, you know, and try and kick it up a notch into more, 90s. I don't know if it was a time-bound thing, but it was just, we have to do some fresh thing with it. And I think we achieved that. Why I think these two songs work so well, in a way, with people, if you notice, both these songs move from major to minor and back several times. And it's not a conscious thing I did. It's just, it came out in the writing. And I think this mirrors a real life situation. Life isn't all one way. It's not all one way sunny. It's not all one way tragic. I look at these songs as like little mini symphonies, because they have discrete movements and sections. I think that really struck a resonance with a lot of people. Although, again, you wouldn't analyze it off the bat when you heard it. It's just like washes over you like music, but it takes you on a trip that way. Both of them have these insistent guitar figures that are a bit plaintive. Grace has the arpeggiated guitar, and Mojo Pen has this recurring obsessive question and answer thing. Especially Grace, there's a propulsion of those arpeggiated intro figures on the guitar. And then it whirls you into this, kind of mad waltz feeling a little bit, but there's a dark and kind of demonic feeling to it somewhat. But then it goes into this chiming, almost like church bells section when it busts into the major key. So the contrast of the two things set up a beautiful tension, and that people want to hear it again. But yeah, I think that it is a trademark. It's my trademark finger picking applied to electric guitar. It's very much me. I do, and I have done quite a bit of fingerstyle guitar in working on my own music for years and years. These days, I'm more about acoustic guitar when I'm touring, trying to simplify everything. But I love fingerpicking on the acoustic and the electric because you can really express orchestral ideas in a very elegant and compact way. And it's very immediate for the person who hears it because it's one guy creating this kind of like cascade of notes and in real time, I use delays and effects as well, and back then a lot of space guitar, people on the tracks, the BBC, for instance, on the exam that English people have to take to get a GRE, I think in music, claim there's a synthesizer on Grace. There is no synthesizer, folks. That's my space guitar doing all those sounds. I like all these different palette colors that you can get out of a guitar, but if I had a desert island guitar, it'd be the acoustic guitar because, well, I could entertain myself more with the finger picking. It's a very full sound there, and well, I know that as far as credit goes, many people do not realize that that is me who wrote those figures, and Jeff learned how to play them, and so on many of his live shows, he, well, pretty much, except when I guested with him, he would play them. But I wrote them, and yeah, just to clarify who did what here, I think credit is very important. Bittersweet is kind of, to me, my favorite expression in art. And the blues, if you want to actually get down to it, to me is the most singular example of this kind of musical form, because there's all kind of blues. There's happy blues, sad blues, tragic blues, ecstatic blues. But, to me, I'm really moved when I hear a sliding pitch, or a note bent slightly. You could analyze it as a quarter tones, between the white key and the black key on a piano. I like those spaces. I use a lot of it in my music. There's a very bluesy undercurrent in everything that I do. So yeah, I'm fundamentally a blues guitarist, but I don't limit myself to labels either. I came from the Captain Beefheart school, which was "Lick My Decals Off, Baby." That was one of his album titles, meaning get rid of labels. It's hard when you put a label on something; it gets stuck in time and fixed. And I'm very mutable and changeable kind of personality, so I don't want to be, filed away as one thing or another. It's also, in one sense, maybe it helps certain artists because to be classified as one thing, it's easier for the consumer to identify what it is that you do in case he or she might like it. Then, okay, I know this guy. So with me, I've done 30 albums to date, all different kind of music, but they have a blues root, I think, through most of it. And yet, by putting out such diverse albums, I've blurred my identity to the mass audience, because it's like hard if you ask them what I might sound like. They're like, well, depending on what album they know me from. Not all of them we're gonna pick up on 30 records. So I don't know. There's a pro and con. There's a plus minus on all this stuff, but that's what it is. It's like the light and the dark, the plus minus, the yin and the yang, the bitter and the sweet. I'm just trying to keep rolling with all of this energy into the point where I can't do it anymore, and then I just say, okay, I said what I'm going to say, but anyway, I'm trying to articulate to you now what went through me when I was thinking about these songs. What am I working on now? I have a new album due out in November called The World of Captain Beefheart, which features the great Nona Hendrix on vocals. She was in La Belle, originally Patti LaBelle and the Bluebells, and they had a big hit called Lady Marmalade, everybody knows. Voulez-vous coucher avec moi ce soir? So Nona's a Beefheart fan, and we hooked up a couple years ago, and this record is some of the best of the Beefheart canon, some of his more R&B accessible numbers done in that style, and also some of the real dark, weird Beefheart stuff too. And so that'll be out November 10th on Knitting Factory Records. I finished another record of just solo guitar, acoustic solo guitar, called Cool Hand Luke, in a studio in Prague. I don't know when that's coming out, but I hope sometime next year. And I'm about to finish a new album of 30s Chinese pop, and I have a great singer on this, Feifei Yang. So this is The Edge of Heaven Volume 2, and it's very exciting for me to go back to this music and revisit it. And actually, we've cut a version of Grace with Feifei singing the whole thing translated into Mandarin Chinese. And you gotta hear that. I'm thinking about albums all the time, next projects, and so, but that right now, that's what's on my plate that I'm looking at and thinking about what I'm gonna do after that. I'm not sure, but I have a lot of music in me still, and I want to get it out there.